Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm making overalls as a part of my me-made wardrobe. I'm going to be using this simplicity pattern to get started. So I am taking all of the contents out and organizing them, the instruction pamphlet as well as the actual pattern pieces, just to get acquainted with where I should start. And I'm going to be doing pattern B for the option for my overalls. I prefer the kind of cropped length on this one, and I think the fit will be really nice. So I already measured myself and know that I will be cutting out this pattern in the size medium. So here I am unfolding it. These patterns are so huge, it's kind of funny. And I am now cutting out all of my pattern pieces. As you see here, this is so tedious. There are so many to cut out, and don't judge me for using my fabric scissors here, okay? I'm just cutting out all these pieces. It takes me quite a while, but once I get them all ready, you can see all the different patterns that I cut out. Here, there is a bunch. And when you're done with all of your scraps, throw a little party because you did it. And that was a lot of work. Now I'm going to be ironing all of my pattern pieces here just to get all of those stubborn wrinkles out from when it was folded up inside the envelope. Once you have all this complete, it's time to move on to the next step. But before that, let's take a little cat intermission. I don't know about anybody else, but does your pets always get in the way of whatever project that you're working on? Because mine sure do. As you can see here, I'm ready to start laying out my pieces, and my cats are having a fight. But anyways, once they moved on from that, I am starting to lay down my pattern pieces onto my fabric. And you can see here, I'm trying to figure out what the best configuration is. And I know it says on the pattern instructions, but I was working with a bit of a different amount of yardage, so it was a little tricky at first. Now I'm onto the fun task of pinning and cutting out all of my pieces. As you see here, this is another really tedious part of the pattern making process, but it is really satisfying to finally get to cut all these pieces out and see what I'm actually going to be working with. This was a really huge piece, so it took me a little bit of moving around to be able to properly cut the entire piece out, and the whole thing didn't fit on my cutting board, so I was trying really hard not to cut the fabric or the carpet underneath, and that was a bit difficult. But I didn't want to keep moving it around. I was being a bit lazy, so it took me a little longer, but I did finally get it done, as you can see here. After I got all that fabric cut out, I moved on to my interfacing pieces. So I'm just pinning my designated interfacing pattern pieces to my interfacing and cutting all of those out. I then started ironing on all of the interfacing to the designated pattern pieces for each one that was required. Now for the fun part, I actually get to start working on the pattern. So here I am starting to make my pockets, pinning one of my pocket pieces to one of the leg pieces here. Once I have that all pinned, I take that over to my sewing machine. I'm using a double needle throughout this entire project. I probably wouldn't recommend this, but I really didn't want to keep switching my needles. Here I am just cutting out the bulk on that pocket here and ironing it over to the other side. Once I have that ironed, I'm taking that back to my sewing machine and giving it a nice top stitch right over that same area. I completed both of my pockets, so here I am laying them out, getting prepped and ready for the next step. You can see these pockets. This is only my second time making pockets, and this was a new method, so it was really interesting and fun. Now I am giving you a bit of a pattern instruction check-in to show you where I'm at. I am on step 3, making the fake fly. So I'm lining up my pieces, good sides facing together, pinning where I need to keep the fabric in place. And then I'm going to pin the fly area together to get that ready to be sewed. I'm doing a bit of some markings here to mark where that fold is going to be and where I need to actually sew. Now I'm taking that over to the sewing machine and getting those lines ready and sewn together. As you can see here, I'm adjusting my stitch length to a 5 because I'm going to be doing a basting stitch, which is meant to be removed for the actual fly part of the overalls. Now I'm taking it to my overlocker and overlocking that fly just to make sure that the seams don't fray. Now I'm doing some more pinning, as you can see here, taking it back to my handy dandy sewing machine and getting that top stitch in place. Once I get that top stitch done, I can move on to my next step, which is creating the pocket. So I'm right on to step number 5 here. So I'm getting prepped to do a double hem. So I'm ironing once and then folding it under and ironing again, clipping in place, and then taking it to my machine to do a top stitch. As you can see, that top stitch looks really nice, and now once I kind of pin my edges to make a hem on the other sides of the pocket, I can actually pin it to the bib pattern piece. As you see here, I'm removing my clips that I used to keep my hem in place and pinning in place of those clips in order to secure it to the bib piece when I take it to my sewing machine. So now I'm going to be sewing all around the pocket edges here. A little tricky with a double needle, but I started to get the hang of it after a little while. Now I'm turning those pieces inside out after I connect the bib pieces together, and you can see it's starting to come along. I love this part in the process when your pieces are starting to look more finished. Now I'm ironing the seams here, making sure everything is flat and in place, and I can now start to actually attach the bib piece to the front of the pants. So here I am starting that process, pinning that along the edge there, and magic. It is all sewn together. Didn't you love how quick that came together? Now I'm actually all done with the front piece, and it's turning out really nice for my first major pattern project. I'm really loving how it's turning out. Now we're halfway done. You know the drill, it's another pattern instructions check-in, and I'm on step 9. And this is where I start to work on the back piece, and I'm going to be starting with the pockets. So I'm going to repeat those same steps that I did for the pocket on the front, creating my double hem here for both of my pocket pieces, pinning in place, doing that top stitch, and then I will be able to pin it to each of the back legs to make 2 back pockets, as you can see here. And again, taking to my sewing machine, getting the hang of the curve on the pockets this time around. It's getting a little bit easier. Those curves are always a bit tricky, even for more advanced sewists, so I'm trying to cut myself a break here. Now, as you can see, both of those pockets are sewed on, and I can actually connect those 2 leg pieces together. So I'm pinning along the sides here, and I'm going to be sewing along one of these edges to get these 2 pieces secured together. After sewing these 2 pieces together, I'm going to iron off camera, and then I am going to do a top stitch on the good side of the fabric to secure that seam down in place. Once I get that top stitch done, we can see that we're really making some progress here. So this is where the back of the overalls is currently at, and I think it's looking so good. Now we're moving on to the straps. So I have 2 straps that I need to make, as you can see here. And first things first, I'm going to be placing the good sides together and pinning along all of those edges for both of these strap pieces. Once I got everything pinned, leaving the bottom edge open, I'm going to sew along the left, top, and right edges to get all of these secured into place. I'm going to be turning those inside out and cutting out the bulk, and I'll be left with something like this after I do the top stitching. So looking really nice and finished now. Now I'm going to be pinning on each of these straps to that back piece and getting these secured in place. After that, I'm going to be prepping this fun little piece by serging the bottom edges to ensure that they do not fray after I attach it to my overalls. As you can see, here I am attempting to attach it. I really had to look long and hard at the instructions to make sure I was doing this right, but I finally get it pinned on correctly, and as you can see, this is what it looks like after it's sewed on and turned the right way. It looks really nice, and it wasn't as hard as I initially thought. So I'm just ironing out any of the wrinkles and getting those seams prepped. And now I'm folding in the facings on the side here, pinning those in place and sewing them together. Now I'm going to be focusing on the hems here, doing a double hem again like I did for the pockets, except it's a little trickier because there's a bit of a curve and it is a smaller hem. So it was a little tricky when I brought it to the sewing machine to make sure all of the fabric was caught in the stitches, but I did manage to make it work. Okay, this is where things really start to come together. As you can see, I'm laying out both of my main pieces here. And if we take a look at the instructions, you can see I'm on step 15, which is really crazy. I'm actually coming along really nicely here. So I actually get to combine both of these pieces in this step. So now I'm pinning along the outer edge of the legs here so that I can get prepped for the sewing machine. Once I have those all pinned, here I am at the sewing machine sewing these together. This is the part, like I said, everything really starts to come together when you actually start combining your main pieces, so this was super exciting. Now I'm pinning the inner leg area together. What you didn't see is the 45 minutes of me seam ripping the other step out because I did it completely wrong. I didn't look at the instructions close enough, but mistakes happen and I was just happy to move on. So I pinned that together and I was able to sew it together here as well. So I'm sewing this inner seam. I had to make a bit of an adjustment after doing an initial try on because it hung a little low for my liking, so I had to adjust the seam in some areas. And now I am serging the edge of that seam. It actually didn't tell me to do this in the instructions, which I felt was a bit odd because I was already seeing a bit of fraying. So I made sure to take this to my overlocker and serge the seams to give it a finished look. Now I'm on to one of the final steps, and that's creating the hem for both of the pant legs. I'm doing a double hem here, which is a little larger than the pockets, but I prefer to shorten the length a little bit. I then needed to create some buttonholes for the sides of the overalls, and it was going well until it wasn't. I got really frustrated. Some of the buttonholes weren't working because of the thickness and unevenness of the fabric it was trying to work on, but I managed. Now I get to install the overall hardware, which means we're nearing really close to the end. This is actually my final step. So I get to get out my trusty hammer each of these pieces in place so that they're really sturdy and attached to my fabric. And I think they actually turned out really nice. This was my first time attaching this kind of hardware, and it turned out to be really simple, actually. Once I have those attached, I'm going to test out my straps here, hook it on, make sure everything is secure, and adjust the straps to my liking. And with that, my overalls are complete. thank you so much for joining me on my overall making journey. I hope to see you on another part of the internet, but until next time, I hope you have a great day and keep creating.